Can you really, like, truly future-proof your business against cyber attacks?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. And it feels like everyone's scrambling for the answer, especially with all these high-profile breaches we keep seeing.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at Palo Alto Networks, that's PANW if you're following along with their stock, and their latest earnings call, transcript, press release, even some analyst chatter, to see how they're tackling this whole cybersecurity landscape shift.
So no pressure. But are they the cybersecurity knights in shining armor, then?
Well, let's just say they're definitely a major player in the game. And what's interesting here is that we're seeing a real shift in the cybersecurity landscape overall. It's not just about growth anymore. It's about navigating this increasingly complex web of threats.
Yeah, it feels like the stakes are higher than ever. Like you see those headlines, single breaches costing companies, what, billions with a B?
Absolutely. And it's not always just about the immediate financial hit either. Some companies are facing existential threats, forced to rebuild their entire IT infrastructure from the ground up. You remember that widespread tech outage not too long ago?
Oh, how could I forget that? It felt like the whole internet was holding its breath there for a minute.
Right. Well, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. It was a major wake-up call for a lot of businesses, making them realize just how vulnerable they are. And the methods these attackers are using, they're constantly evolving too. Like, you might think ransomware is old news.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't that so 2022?
Well, it's definitely not gone. It's actually become even more insidious.
Oh, yeah. How so? What are they doing now?
They're upping the ante with this thing called public ransomware extortion. So it's not just about encrypting your data anymore. It's about publicly shaming you for it, too.
Ooh, so it's a double whammy, data breach and PR nightmare, all in one. Ouch.
Exactly. Puts companies in a really, really tough spot. They're under immense pressure to make a decision, often with very little time to react.
Yeah. And we're not talking about days to figure things out here, are we?
You'd be surprised. Our research indicates that in almost half of these attacks, hackers can get their hands on your data in less than 24 hours after they've breached your system. So yeah, it's a race against the clock.
So with the clock ticking louder than ever, how is Palo Alto Networks actually tackling this whole cybersecurity landscape shift? From what I've been reading, they seem to be ahead of the curve, outpacing the market. Even with all this craziness, what's their secret weapon?
Well, one of their key strategies, and they talk about this a lot, is platformization.
Okay, platformization.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a lot. Break it down for me. What exactly does it mean, and why should I, as someone, just trying to keep my own business secure, care?
Yeah, you're right. It can sound a bit buzzwordy, but it's actually a pretty fundamental shift. It's about moving away from having a bunch of separate security products, kind of like a patchwork quilt, and towards a more integrated, unified approach. Think of it like, imagine those massive manufacturing plants, right? Used to be they had separate systems for everything.
Oh, right, yeah.
Now they're all about bringing everything onto a single platform, more efficient.
Right, makes sense. Streamlining things, getting all the different security tools to actually talk to each other.
Exactly. It's about creating a more, I guess you could say, holistic and efficient security posture. And it's not just theory. Palo Alto Networks actually drew a direct line between their platform strategy and their success. They saw more customer engagement, especially at the C-suite level, by the way. And get this, their earnings call transcript even mentioned that their CEO basically said, "I wish we had done this sooner. It's been revolutionary for our business."
Wow, strong words from the top. Okay, but let's drill down a bit. What are the actual building blocks of this platform? What does it actually look like in action? Sure, so they focus on three main areas: network security, cloud security, and security operations. So starting with network security, this is their bread and butter firewalls. But hold on, we're not talking about those old school hardware firewalls you might be picturing.
Right, those big clunky boxes in a server room somewhere.
Exactly. They're all about software-defined solutions now, many cloud-based, by the way, and with a huge emphasis on SaaS.
Okay, so not my grandfather's firewall. Got it. I keep hearing that acronym, though, say SaaS. What makes their approach different, though? Everyone and their brother seems to be jumping on that bandwagon.
You're right, it's a crowded space, but what sets Palo Alto Networks apart is how they're integrating SaaS into their broader platform. They're not just providing secure access, they're tying it into things like threat intelligence and data loss prevention, a much more comprehensive approach.
So it's not just about keeping the bad guys out. It's about, controlling the flow of information, even within your network, too.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Okay, you mentioned cloud security as the next pillar. What's happening on that front?
Well, as more companies shift their operations to the cloud, which, let's be honest, is pretty much everyone these days, that obviously becomes prime target for these attackers, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
What's interesting here is that Palo Alto Networks is becoming a major player in cloud security. They even mention some big name tech giants as customers in their earnings report, and they're using AI in some really innovative ways to secure cloud environments. For example, they have this AI powered tool that can automatically detect and remediate misconfigured cloud services, which is like a major source of vulnerabilities.
So they're basically automating the cloud security guard's job. Yeah,
Essentially, yeah.
that's pretty slick.
Yeah.
All right, last but not least, you mentioned security operations. What's happening in that realm?
This is where things get really interesting. Their XIM platform is a game changer when it comes to detecting and responding to security incidents. It uses AI and automation to analyze massive amounts of data, identify threats in real time, and orchestrate responses. We're talking about cutting response times from day down to
Minutes.
minutes. In their report, they specifically called out how XIM helped one customer in the financial industry prevent a potential data breach that could have cost them, get this, millions.
Wow, minutes. That's incredible. But is that always realistic? I mean, some of these attacks seem incredibly complex.
Right.
Remember, minutes sounds amazing on paper, but yeah, I can totally see how in real life it might get a little more complicated than that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's no magic easy button in cybersecurity, right? No matter what anyone tries to sell you.
Right.
But what XAM does really well is automate those initial stages of detection and response. It's like giving your security team a massive head start, which then frees them up to focus on the more complex stuff, the strategic decisions that really require that human element.
So it's kind of like giving them superpowers, but not replacing them entirely, which honestly is a little less scary to think about.
Yeah, exactly. Human expertise is still absolutely crucial, especially when you're dealing with completely new types of attacks or when you're trying to understand the why behind the attack, the motivations, the tactics of the attacker. That's where human analysts really shine.
Makes sense. It really sounds like Palo Alto Networks has a pretty solid grasp on this whole constantly evolving cybersecurity landscape thing. But what does it all actually mean for the average business owner out there? Like, what should they be paying attention to right now?
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me from their report was this kind of subtle shift in how they're measuring their own success. They're moving away from some of those traditional metrics and focusing more on things like NGS ARR, that's Next Generation Security Annual Recurring Revenue, and RPO, which stands for Remaining Performance Obligation.
Okay, gonna need a translation for those acronyms. What does that shift tell us, though, about their strategy and how it impacts their customers?
Sure. So essentially, they're putting a much bigger emphasis on long-term value over those quick short-term gains. NGS ARR tells us they're betting big on their next generation solutions, like that XIM we were talking about. And RPO indicates a strong commitment to, actually delivering ongoing value to their customers, not just making the sale and then disappearing.
So it's less about selling a product and more about building an actual relationship.
Exactly. It's about becoming a trusted partner. And honestly, that's huge in the cybersecurity world. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's an ongoing process, and you need someone you can actually trust to be there with you for the long haul.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So any final thoughts for our listeners out there, the ones trying to navigate this whole crazy cybersecurity landscape and actually come out on top?
Well, we've been laser focused on Palo Alto Networks this whole episode, but one thing they mentioned that I thought was really interesting is that they actually called out specific companies, big players in media, energy, all sorts of industries that are already using their platform and seeing
Right.
real results. So, my advice, don't be afraid to do a little competitive research. See what your peers are doing. You might be surprised what you can learn.
Love that. Never hurts to see what the competition's up to, right?
Exactly.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up for this deep dive. We covered a lot of ground today. From those ever-evolving cyber threats to Palo Alto Networks' platform approach, and of course the always interesting role of AI in all of this. Hopefully you're all feeling a little more informed, maybe even a little inspired to, take your own cybersecurity game to the next level. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay secure.